Welcome to the Better Outcomes podcast, where we discuss all things leadership, sales, and communication in Australian business. At Better Outcomes Training, we provide world-class training solutions for businesses who want to arm their teams with cutting-edge skills to lead better, sell better, and enjoy more success, purpose, and profit from the work they do. For a full breakdown of all the courses we offer, visit www.better-outcomes.com.au. There's also a link in the description. Now, on to today's podcast. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. Another episode, the Better Outcomes Training Podcast. Back here with Mr. Harrison, looking fresh, ready to go. Paulie, how are you today?
I am absolutely electrifying, my brother. Actually, that's not true. I've had a whole day of facilitation, which was awesome because we were talking about sales training today. Oh, we're doing sales training, which was phenomenal. And I think whilst you leave everything there, so you don't bring anything back with you. You're exhausted when you finish up. But when you do that and you're able to get clients who are so engaged, there's nothing better. You come away from that. You've done a hard day's work for a hard day's pay, and hopefully clients are going home tonight. They feel more confident. They want to go out and utilize the skills tomorrow. And I always believe that people have big frustrations when they come to training. And by that, I mean there's particular problems that they're dealing with at work that they don't have the solutions to. And my job, I have to be able to give them a solution to those problems, which inspires people to take action, gives them more confidence, and gets a lot more traction for them as well. Because you know this as well as I do, because when things are going well at work, then all the other facets of life go well as well. Yes. When things are going rough at work, they say leave work at work, but we don't. We're human beings, man. Come on.
No. It's such a big part of people's lives. Big long days and so much extra that comes with it. It's very hard to leave it behind.
Absolutely. How about yourself, brother?
Big days, man. Big days on the tools, chasing hooks.
Yeah.
Swinging steel. We seem to be getting busier and busier. So it's good fun working with a bunch of youngsters who, now that I'm an old man, not only keep reminding me, but keep, I'm competitive. And I'm competitive and don't mind a challenge at all. So but it has been big days, and as well as trying to fit in everything else around it as well, everything for better outcomes and a few other things that are going on. Busy times. Wouldn't have it any other way.
It's the best way to live, I think. It's a good way to live. If you're under the clock, time is busy, and you got to get from A to B. It causes stress, but I think it's a good kind of stress.
It is, and it's very rewarding when you can get through. Like it's time. Sometimes it's tough. You've got it coming at you from everywhere, and dramas and stress and all that. But if you can kind of keep your head clear and work on one thing and work a bit of a list and knock things off, it gives you a good sense of accomplishment and also a lot of confidence I take away from that. Like, I can do that. I can do it again. And then next time it comes along, and I've got you.
Yeah.
I've got this, so.
Absolutely. I really like the point you just made there about focusing on one thing at a time, because I think that very often what happens is, particularly in this world that we live in where, online platforms, they know that, what's the term? Attention is currency.
Yes.
Attention is currency. So if they can distract you to focus on something else, they're going to be able to monetize that. But so we get hit with all these distractions all the time. And I think that leads to a lot of overwhelm very often. But if we're able to focus on one thing, be fully present with it, you can grind through it, you can get done what you need to get done, and then you're on to the next. And I think that's a really good way forward. I really like that point that you raised there of that ability to focus clearly.
It was something that I was struggling with, that social media side of things, the last probably month or so. I kept what I got was getting annoyed at myself was I was kept checking the phone and seeing the notifications, and it was starting to do my head, and it was becoming a bit of a habit that I didn't want. So changed up the home screen, had a bit of a think about it, got the home screen on the phone and got rid of all the individual socials, cleaned the phone right up of all the apps and stuff, stuck them in folders and cleaned it down to the basic stuff back on the phone. So I actually have to now physically go in and look to see what's on. So it's easier for me to switch that off and focus on what I have to do. So
absolutely.
It's, I don't know about you, but sometimes you're in a bit of a flow doing whatever you're doing, and then you get an interruption from whatever, and it breaks it. And it's hard to get back into that little bit of flow. It's just, it's irritating sometimes. So, and it's over nothing. Some of the distractions are over nothing. It's just a noise. So trying to get that little bit of extra noise out of my head and concentrate on what's going on has been a little bit of a game changer. We'll see how it goes. But it seems to be helping so far.
Oh, that's good, man. That's good. You can get in those flow states, and then you get a much higher effectiveness and efficiency of the work. Yes. The quality of work you're doing. If you're getting distracted the whole time and you're literally going from one context to the next,
Yeah.
And it almost takes different parts of the brain. So you lose in those economies of scale on the work you're doing, if you're back and forth between all different things.
You do. And I find that I have to try and concentrate on one thing and bang it out, even if I just get the bulk of it done, because if I'm jumping between 2 and 3 things and multitasking, everything just ends up getting half done.
Absolutely. You can't ride 2 horses at the same time. I think that's American saying. And you can just get a visual of that as well. So that would stop you from ever doing that.
There's always a good way of putting things. Keeps you grounded. I love it. Now today, I want to have a bit of a talk. We want to go down a bit of a little niche area that's come up, and it's all around credibility, which I would like to talk about. I mean, we'll talk about it in general senses, but also in get a bit specific about sales, about what salespeople need to bring to the table in terms of credibility. Maybe they're looking to become more credible. It's something that it's going through my mind as I move towards this career change of mine. What makes you more credible, makes you seem more credible? What are some of the influencing factors of credibility? Can it be trained? Things like this, all these little questions around credibility. I thought if we give it a bit of a run over, we could hit it from a few different angles. And see, obviously we'll do our usual thing in tangent, maybe to farming or jiu-jitsu or whatever as we do.
Rugby World Cup coming up in 4 years' time.
Got the World Cup coming up, the rugby's on, look, let's go. In our own unique style. But I thought if we start to really dig down into some of these issues, it could really help some people out, which is what I'm all about. So credibility, Paulie, how do you see it? Let's try and define it first. What is it? Especially around sales and in terms of business. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think credibility could be maybe that your reputation precedes you in a good way. Your reputation precedes you. I think if your reputation does precede you, I think that would be a high degree of credibility. Now, again, there might be people listening to this and saying, well, it could be in a different way. Yeah, it probably could as well. But I think from an aspect with regards to credibility, particularly before we've met someone, because there might well be times where you hear people's reputations and somebody who's got good character in your eyes already makes a high recommendation of somebody else you don't know. So that might be something we could refer to as borrowed credibility. If you, who I trust and what have you, say to me, Paul, you need to go and talk to this, and this person because they can absolutely help you with that. They've already got one foot in the door if they're going to sell me something. Because effectively,
yes, agreed.
The way I'm perceiving you is that you've got no reason to do anything but be interested in my best interests. Okay, so therefore, there's a much higher degree of credibility. So I think that can be one aspect. Certainly before I've met the person, if they've got credibility, then effectively, thanks. If they've got credibility through a third-party recommendation or something like that, or I've read articles about what they've done, I've seen their social media, I've taken value from them before I've met them, I think those could be aspects of credibility. Now, I think if I meet someone and I decide, and we all decide whether, and a lot of the time might not be logical, but I think a lot of the time we meet someone, we've never met them before. There is a small amount of time where we assess people, and people say, well, I don't judge people. People do judge people. Listen, if there's a gang of kids coming up this, or a gang of burly looking men walking towards you with sort of clubs and knuckle dusters, you're going to judge that situation pretty quickly, and you're going to get to the other side of the road. But effectively, I think that, we assess each other, and we're not always aware of how we assess each other. But I think that a networking event is a great example of this. If you go and meet people that you've never met before, and everybody wants to make a reasonable impression because, there's always a likelihood of potentially doing business there. I think that when you actually meet someone, then you, over a relatively small amount of time, you're going to get an idea of how you perceive that person. And I think that is very, very powerful as to whether you believe that person is credible or not. And I think there's a number of things that people look for, but to decide whether somebody else is credible or not in their eyes. And I think that's a real area where people want to be able to develop a high degree of credibility in a very short amount of time. If we go down the route of things like, the social media, putting good content out there, or you mentioned this was a sales focus. So if I'm talking to people that I've never met before, and I want to have credibility in their eyes, there's an old saying that says people buy from people who educate them. And if I can educate you on how to get a better outcome before I've even met you, like if you've interacted with your content online or my content online, you've learned something, then automatically I think there's going to be some degree of credibility already earned there, which I think that's how we work very often. Does that go in the right direction of answering your question?
It is. It goes right down the middle of it. The first thing that pops out is that book that we read, The Status Game.
Oh God, yeah.
That whether we like it or not, and that book blew me away. It is a cracking book, people. It just keeps hitting.
Yeah.
That really showed me and opened my eyes to how much we are trying to be like everyone else and fit in, and make little groups, which to me really got me thinking in terms of sales. And when when I'm rocking up to meet a new client, or to deliver maybe on a training day, I've put a lot of thought into, I think I've said it before about how I try and get my own house in order. I want to make sure that I'm all squared away, I'm dressed appropriately, I'm bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, I'm ready to go. Make a good impression first up before you even open your mouth half the time, because make sure you're on time or early, bring everything you need, that kind of thing. That to me, because whether we like it or not, we like you said, we really judge. We really do judge people, and first impressions really count. So that's where it starts from me. And like you said, now you've taken it another step where maybe someone's actually already met me before I've met them. Maybe they've got some online stuff. Maybe I've been referred through them, or they've been referred through a third party as well. Which there's got to be something there. So reputation's always been monstrous for me in my career. That's something that I've always based everything I do around. Customer's always right. The extra lengths I go to make sure everyone's right. I think that showed over the years, because I never had to advertise for business ever. Once. So it was a lot of word of mouth stuff. And in the building industry, your reputation precedes you sometimes, because people come and see your work before you go. So I had a lot of that. I'd say to people, if you want to know what I'm all about, go and see, Kirsty and Dave or whoever whose house I've built. Go and have a look at them, have a chat to them, and they'll show you. And friends of friends, stuff like that. Honesty is a big one for me. Honesty and expertise as well. I want to make sure that the person I'm dealing with knows what they're talking about.
Here's a question for you, Cuz. How do you assess that, mate? How do you assess whether somebody's being transparent with you and that they're capable? Without seeing their work, you're assessing them, you're having a one-to-one conversation. How would you decide whether they have credibility in your eyes or not?
So it's a few questions, all about your communication, I reckon. When it comes up, being you can tell when someone's being brutally honest. You can tell when someone's telling the truth. Especially when you've been around people long enough. Everyone's got it. I think they've got a bit of a sixth sense for whether people are lying to them or not. Also, like being transparent with your answers, not trying to hide anything at all. Maybe even doing like self audits. What does Chris Voss say? Like an accusation audit.
Yeah.
This is what, you go with me. This is what you get. This is the bad side of things. This I'm going to tell you right now. This is, I'm not the cheapest person out there, but I make sure all this is done. Those little things that are put into first impressions all around that opening communication thing for me.
Here's my question to you, and we're going a little bit deeper, and I'm putting you on the spot, and this is a question that I don't think very many people can answer.
Oh, good.
But I'm keen to hear your insights on this. You've said that most people can tell when somebody's being truthful or not being truthful. Everything I do with regards to training is always focused on getting better outcomes. So what I do is I look for what people who are getting good outcomes are already doing. And then I want to figure out what they're doing. Because if I can figure that out, then I can codify it. If I can codify it, I can teach it. Okay. Yep. Now, how do you tell if somebody is being truthful or not, if they're being transparent or not? I think you're right. I think I agree with you. My question to you is, how do you actually tell?
I can tell you how it's done in the tradies world.
Go for it.
I can tell you exactly how it's done. Yep. If you come up to me and ask me, do you know what you're doing? If I give you a smart answer like, nah, why don't you come over here and show me? Then you know what's going on. If you ask a person, a tradie, if you say, do you know what they're doing? If they say no, you know they're a cracker. You know they're an expert. However, on the other hand, if you say to them, do you know what you're doing? And they say, yeah, of course I do. I've been doing this 15 years. If they put in how many years they've been doing it, that's bad. That's bad.
So it's a sense of defensiveness to some degree, you reckon?
It's like a sense of defensiveness. So to break it down, confidence. They're really confident. They're not overly confident, just a good, solid, confident, yep, I can do that. I can do this. That's easy, piece of cake. When they come back with, obviously, if you're asking something quite that's quite detailed, they can come back. Being an expert, they can come back with a little bit more than what you've researched on. They'll go, yep, what about we can do it this way? They can give you alternate strategies to that. It's a hard one to answer, isn't it?
That absolutely is. But that's the business that we're in. I mean, effectively, I want to be able to figure out what are people doing. And then because I really believe our BS detectors are way better than what we give ourselves credit for. Yes. But I think that very often, because then it's going to be people listening to this saying, well, then why have I trusted people when I shouldn't have trusted people? I think that's a very good question. I think that firstly, particularly when it comes to the sales world, selling is a lot more difficult than, it's a lot easier than very often salespeople make it. Very often we overcomplicate the circumstance and we love to tell ourselves why as well, okay? I think that very often people want to buy. There's that old saying that people love to buy, they just hate to be sold to.
Yeah.
And when they want to buy, if you're dealing with somebody who's a seller, who's not that open, not that transactional, not that honest with you, then very often you can be blind to red flags very often, particularly if you're between a rock and a hard place and you want to find that solution. I think, and I mean, I don't know a lot about this, but relationships, I think that's the same thing. If you've got people who are more interested in a relationship first and secondary selecting the person versus people who are focused on meeting the right person and then the relationship is secondary, what I think is if people are highly driven towards a relationship, they'll subconsciously block out red flags. I think. Now, again, I'm no expert on this, as we can clearly tell, okay? Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, I think that sometimes people are so driven for a relationship, they can block out the red flags, that confirmation, the cognitive dissonance, blocking out things that go against their beliefs. And I think very often when buyers want to buy, they want to buy, and then they can sometimes deal with maybe salespeople who, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they are being honest, but the terminology that's being used by the salesperson is interpreted in the best possible light by the buyer. Okay. It's like if I'm dealing with a big problem at business and you tell me, Paulie, I can deal with that, no problems at all. It's like, oh, hallelujah, now I can sleep at night. That's the thing. So I want to hear that there's a solution. Only then we go through the process, I sign the contract, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then later on, when we start to apply it, it's not as good as what I hoped it would be. But here's the thing. My desire to find the solution there very often can mean that I'm not actively listening to the salesperson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have it. We have the term the other way around with sales training, which is you're listening with happy ears, which is when a very hard-nosed buyer is saying, yeah, we're interested. Let me have a think about it. We'll consider the situation. We'll get back with you. And then the novice salesperson goes back to the sales director and says, definitely got one. They said they're interested. It's like,
yeah.
Mate, it's like you got happy ears on there. You tend to hear what you want to hear, you know?
Exactly. I mean, I've crashed into that quite a few times where I know builders who said to me, will say to the client that just tell them what they want to hear. Just tell them what they want to hear and get them to sign. The person will be, whether they're locked in on this new kitchen or whether they want a particular kind of bathroom or they want this or want that. And a lot of the time the builder will go, yeah, we can do that. We can do this. We can do whatever. And the person's so happy that their dreams can come true of what they want.
Yeah.
They're not really listening to what or thinking about anything else because they're getting what they want.
Yeah. It's a highly emotional sale, man. Yeah.
It is it's a lot of money, of money. And then whereas in terms of that, I will make sure I talk through with them and make sure, okay, if that's what you want, you have to understand that this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to get. It's not going to look exactly like that picture because the space you've got's different.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, it is. Look, that's bigger. This is smaller, that kind of thing. You start, and I will always make sure that even if that's still what they want, I'll still do it for them, but I'll make sure I talk through with them and make sure they know exactly what they're getting into.
Yeah.
So that we end up with a good result at the end. Because like you said, you get to the end and you're like, that doesn't look anything like what's in the picture. Oh, well, I got close enough. You know, you're having the argument later on then, whereas if you get it out in the start, and sometimes it's better to go, mate, I can't do that. I can't do it. Sorry, it's not going to work. You'll have to go and see Joe down the road. If he can do it for you, I can't make it work like that in that spot. And like you said, your reputation precedes you. So
and those mismanaged expectations are massive, man. They really are. Absolutely. That's where so much conflict comes from, mismanaged expectations. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah. And difficult conversations. Difficult conversations. You may need that sale. You may need to put shoes on your kids, but to me, it's got to be done the right way. So, because it has a flow-on effect, not just that deal, that person, the next one, and the next one, and the next one down the line. While we're on that little bit, influence and persuasion.
Yeah.
Now, credibility should, therefore, if you're where we are at the moment with credibility, that should give you a fair amount of ability to influence and persuade, both up and down the chain. Yeah. So talk to me about that as well, because that comes up quite a bit in training. We talk about it a lot about how people want to be seen or perceived to be more influential and to be able to persuade people. So don't know if a lot of people realize that their credibility and what they've been doing ties into that. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a huge aspect here, cuz, and I'm going to break it down a little bit just to break it into a few sections, because I think this will be the best way to help anybody listening to this.
Yep.
You think about this when it comes to influence and persuasion. Okay. And influence and persuasion obviously is going to fall into selling as well. It's going to fall in massively to leadership, and obviously it's part of communication as well. So all three areas of Better Outcomes focuses on. This is going to play a big role. Now, think about this. If I'm trying to influence or persuade, almost by definition, I'm wanting to get you to start doing something new or to change what you were previously doing. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So effectively, let's say you're currently buying from one of my competitors, Now, when I'm training, I go into a lot of detail on this, and we provide breakdowns on exactly how to do this, which we don't just have the time to do today. But effectively, if I'm wanting to get you to start buying from me rather than buying from the competitors, I have to understand that that is going to be a change of your behavior. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and a big, maybe a bit of unknown, bit of risk as well, I would suggest.
And here's where we're going into this. You're right on the money. So effectively, if I'm getting you to change your behavior, I have to. If I want to be successful in this and have a long-term business relationship with you, I have to remove the perceived risk in your mind. Now, if you're currently buying from my competitor and I want you to buy from me, I have to be able to understand what degree of perceived risk you might have in your mind, which is going to stop you from saying yes to me. Now, depending on the circumstance, the nuance of the circumstance, if you've got perceived risk that I don't deal with, you're not going to take action with me. Or if the perceived risk is too big to outweigh the perceived benefit, you're not going to move forward with me. So what could some of the perceived risks be of working with me versus the competitor? Well, competitor might be a little bit slack and what have you, but at least it's rather the devil you know rather than the devil you don't. Okay, so maybe there's some big exposure. Maybe I'm wanting to be your biggest supplier now rather than the other competitor. And at least the other competitor, they kind of deliver a little bit. Maybe 3 out of 4 times they don't deliver perfectly, but you can live with that. If I don't have credibility in your eyes, and that delivery, getting those deliveries is absolutely crucial. If I don't have credibility in your eyes, then you might well think, you know what, there's too much risk here. I've just settled with what I know right now, even though Paul can save me 10%, plus he says he can deliver on time. Okay. So what I have to effectively do is firstly acknowledge that you have perceived risk about working with me, because that's part of natural human decision-making process. Then what I have to do is I have to start to remove that perceived risk, because if that perceived risk is not dealt with, then effectively it's going to present itself as an objection when I want to close you.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting thinking about a perceived risk that I haven't addressed, if there's no perceived risk, it's going to be easy for you to say yes to me. If there is perceived risk, it's going to be very, very easy for you to say no to me. Or you're going to say to me, Paul, let me think about it. Now, I'll tell you this. If there's perceived risk in somebody's mind, and they want to think about it, that risk is not going to get smaller. It's going to get bigger because the human brain has got that negativity bias. So effectively, what I have to be able to do is I have to address that risk. Now, there's a number of different ways we're going to deal with this, but your perception of me is going to dictate whether you're going to trust me or not. The more you trust me, the more you're likely to take risk with me. Okay? So effectively, if I have high credibility in your eyes, chances are you're going to be more trusting of me, and therefore more likely to take a risk with me. Does that still make sense? Or take a bet on me?
Absolutely.
So if I can increase my credibility in your eyes, and the absolute core basis of human trust very often comes down to consistency. I'll trust you if I know what your next move is. Where I get to understand what your next move is if you're highly consistent. If somebody's not consistent, then we won't trust them readily, particularly with big risk. But if I'm able to understand, if I am able to be consistent in your way of thinking, then your thought process is, no, Paul is always consistent. Therefore, he is trustworthy. Therefore, he is more likely to deliver on what he said he would deliver. Now, if I can create that credibility in your eyes, the appearance of more consistency will be there, particularly protecting downside risk. And effectively, then, it's going to be much easier for you to trust me and therefore take a little bit of a risk on me. Does that resonate?
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. It comes back with me, that whole thing comes back to what Vossi talks about, Chris Voss talks about in his book, Never Split the Difference, about
Vossi, is he replying to your emails yet?
No.
You can't call him bossy until he replies to your emails, mate.
I know. It's just, we're in Australia. We just put IE on the end and that's it. We rock on with it.
Absolutely.
He talks about it, an accusation audit, where you're brutally honest up front about what goes on.
Yeah.
You're going to have a hard time. I know Paul's your biggest supplier, but coming to us is going to be very hard because you're well integrated with him. There's going to be a lot of friction coming apart. You don't want to ruin that relationship. It's all these kind of things that, like you said, if you don't address them right at the front, it's going to come back and bite you. Especially when you've got, what do you say? I need to think about it. When I hear those words, I can't remember who spoke about this at length, but as a salesman, when you hear those words, just let me think about it. That means you haven't answered all their questions, and there's something wrong in there. If you've gone through everything, and the person has a clear picture of whether they do want to go with you or not. Remember, because no is quite acceptable. You'll get an answer. You got a yes or a no. If they have to think about it, you haven't quite done your job properly. You haven't addressed something there.
I agree on that. I agree with where you're going with that. I think I'd make an exception, particularly at very, very, very high level decision making, and with very analytical people. So very high level decision making, you very often want to reflect on what's been said, and it's very often taught as best practice to reflect, make an informed decision, all of that good stuff, particularly when you're dealing with people who have they've just had a meeting with you and you've taught them a hell of a lot of stuff for 4 or 5 hours. There's been maybe some heavy negotiation that's been through the night, that type of stuff. People like that those senior level decision makers very often will want some time to reflect. Okay, because again, you don't want to cut down a tree in the winter. And what I mean by that is you don't want to make a decision when you're not in a resourceful state. And a lot of the decision makers that I train, we work at pretty exclusively. The other thing is when you're dealing with very reflective type people. So you can get people who can be quite spontaneous. And you've surmised it absolutely perfectly. But then you'll have people who, and these are normally speaking, and I'm being very generic, I'm being very general here, but very often they are people who are they're a little bit more retracted. They're not always sort of gregarious and outgoing. They're a little bit more reserved. They like to think about what's been said. They take pauses between what they're saying and all of that good stuff. They think about what they're saying, and they like time to reflect. But certainly, to your point, Cuz, I absolutely love it when it comes down to that aspect with, if you haven't answered all of the questions for that decision maker, they may well say to you, let me think about it. Because it's not that maybe they're not reflective, maybe they're not senior level decision makers with a lot on the line, but maybe quite correctly you haven't removed the risk. Maybe you've overly confused them because you've used a lot of your terminology, technical terminology that they're not familiar with, or you've spoken too quickly, or what have you, but they don't want to say, I don't understand, which is crazy because we always know that if we don't understand, we should ask questions. Truth of the matter is, a lot of people will be much more comfortable saying, let me think about it, rather than, than saying, listen, I don't understand what you're saying. Please speak English. I speak English here. Don't speak in your heavy technical terminology here. And it's interesting because people go into that state. If you have a technical salespeople, I'll tell you this right now, because I am training more and more technical salespeople on a weekly basis. And when I say technical, let me just qualify that. People who've got particular skill sets that they went and studied for. Now, I'm going to have salespeople giving me a call saying, I have qualifications as well. What I'm talking about is people like your good self who are absolutely skilled in a particular area, be it a chippy, a sparky, a plumber, or an accountant, or an engineer, or a doctor, or a whatever. Somebody who's qualified in something other than sales. And they started out working in that particular area, but now because they're outgoing, what have you, they're starting to move into more of into a sales type role, because there's a lot of businesses looking for good salespeople right now. And the interesting thing is that these people coming through now having the brilliant technical knowledge, but now they want to be able to learn the soft skills to be able to communicate and sell. Here's a fascinating thing. Human behavior, and this is fascinates me with human behavior. As soon as we feel under pressure, if you put a human being under pressure, we start to go back to our old ways. And I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say I've got a very technical person. Okay, let's say they are a very good engineer. Engineers may be a great example here. Very good engineer. And I want them to start going out and presenting. So say, okay, but presenting's terrifying, as you know. Presenting's terrifying.
Absolutely.
So you say to the engineer, who's now a salesperson, okay, you need to go out and present to this senior level C-suite decision-making board. And if you get this presentation right, we're going to make 200 million. If you get it wrong, we're not going to make anything.
Good, no pressure.
There's a lot of pressure on that person. Here's the fascinating thing that happens. When that person finds the amount of pressure on them, they sense that pressure, they walk into the arena to entertain the decision makers, yes. And they walk out. What starts happening is that emotion starts to hit them, and human beings will always go back to where they know safety is. And the safety very, very, very often goes back to that very technical world. So what very often happens is they walk into the arena, feel nervous, think, oh my goodness, they forget the soft skills and the delivery style, and they go back to what they know. Because we all want to be seen in some positive light by senior people or by anybody really. And if I can go back to my comfort zone, aka talking very technical language, then I feel I'm in control of my environment.
Yeah.
However, what the outcome of that is I'm talking massively technical to my audience. My audience is all big picture thinkers because they're senior level decision makers. And I'm being quite generic here, but effectively the very technical language I'm using is completely foreign to the people who are making the decision. Yes. And they have to then burn cognitive energy to make this decision. And that's where we have a massive disconnect.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate, that was a bit of a rant, but there you go.
No. Keeping it simple is a big thing for salespeople. Keep it simple. And make sure the person on the other side of the table, you're thinking about where their experience is, kind of their view of the world, because there's no point me talking to a lot of the times you have to make sure you stop and explain the things that seem simple and basic and common sense to you, because the other person doesn't know that. And you may sound like, sometimes I go, oh yeah, no, I know that. But you just got to make sure you touch on it anyway, because a lot of the times you'll say something like, I'll be, when you're putting your back hip roof on, you've got and they'll be going, yeah. And they're thinking, what's a hip roof? Well, and they're looking around like, what's a hip roof? Is it something to do with your jeans or something? If you don't stop and just, those little quick explanations like this, oh, okay, the light bulb comes on, you can move on. If it doesn't, you might put 2 or 3 or 4 of those examples together. All of a sudden, you've overburdened the person.
Absolutely.
You're talking to a person with glassy eyes who everything's just bouncing off. So, keeping it simple, even though it may seem like a bit of a lower standard, I guess, or, you're slowing yourself down too much. You've really got to make sure you're up to speed and that person's up to speed with where you are.
Yeah. Just with regards to that to making it simple, I know a lot of people say you need to dumb it down for the audience. Here's my belief, man. Genuinely, absolutely genuinely. I don't believe it's dumbing it down. I believe it's using common language, normal language.
Yeah, which is getting everyone on the same page. Yeah.
I mean, here's the bottom line, man. Every single person that we interact with, I can walk out the street now, grab the first person I'd see there. That person can teach me something that could make my life better. That's a conviction I have about people. I really believe it.
Absolutely.
The thing is, though, we're all subject matter experts in different areas. Even if I'm talking to this person here who's a subject matter in fantasy books about dragons, they can talk to me about dragons. I know nothing about dragons. No. I've been to Wales, but I don't know anything about dragons. But it's like, so effectively, they can talk to me about different scales of dragons. I'd have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a subject matter in that area. Even if I lose everything tomorrow and I have to go and sleep rough or something like that, I'm going to go and ask a homeless person how to survive on the street that night. That's my subject matter expert in that moment. Where can I go and get something to eat? How do I protect myself in this situation? That person then in that moment becomes an absolute subject matter expert. So I don't believe it's dumbing it down. I really don't. I believe it's effectively communicating in a way that 99% of the population would understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you touched on it before when you said there's, even though we don't understand something sometimes and we should ask the question, we don't.
Yeah.
How many times have you been in a room, whether it's presentations or training or something, and all of a sudden the person starts talking above your understanding,
Oof.
in language that you're sitting there thinking, what have I walked into here?
Yeah,
absolutely. Hope he doesn't point to me and ask me a question about what's going on because I'm in trouble. Little do you know that most of the other people in the room are in the same boat. There's a couple of people nodding their heads because they're technical people and they understand what's going on. It's just, whoa, what's going on here? And you're not going to sit there and go, sorry, what do you mean by that? Because then you're going to feel like you're slowing everyone else down as well.
Absolutely.
So as presenters, as trainers, as facilitators, you've got to make sure that, and salespeople, you've got to make sure your audience is all up to speed at the same time,
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of sort of move at the pace of the slowest member of the herd, so to speak, but that's only because you haven't given them the right information. You give them the right information, communicate it well, and you lot better results, a lot better outcomes.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was some research done on some of the greatest speeches ever spoken, I suppose. And I forget the main points of the conversation, the main points of the research, but one of the main points was that the greatest speakers or people who delivered the greatest speeches, they were consistently using about 18 to 1900 words. So they would only use 18 to 1900 words. And now that is a list of, there's 18 to 1900 words that 99% of the population would understand. Now, this causes big breakthroughs for my clients when I'm teaching them how to be able to present. Because I have a lot of clients that I train that English is their second language, okay, or third language even sometimes.
Yeah.
And especially if they're presenting, as well as anybody else does, that you need to be confident if you're going to present really well. And I have a lot of second or third language English speakers who say to me, Paul, I can't feel confident because I don't have full vocabulary that somebody who's got English as a first language. And I always cite that example, which is the greatest speeches that have ever moved audiences, moved nations, created history, and what have you, have been presentations or speeches where very simple language is being used. And when they get that, they understand that, then effectively it's almost like a breakthrough. It's like, I don't have to have massively complex language to be able to really impress people. Because here's the thing, cuz you think about it. If you keep your language easy to understand using that list of 18 or 1900 words, which 99% of the population understands, people don't have to make the effort to try and understand what you're saying.
Exactly what
it's just easy for them to receive.
Precisely what I was thinking.
If you're using language that like somebody has to Google, what does that word mean? You've lost them. You've lost them, Yeah.
Could not put it better. And can I just say, everyone out there who has English as a second language, third language, you are awesome. I haven't even conquered it the first time around. It's a terrible language from what I understand. It is a terrible language. If you don't learn it first, it's very difficult. There's so many traps and mistakes and words are the same. I'm getting this pointed out to me in a brutally honest way as I tried to learn Indonesian, and that just...
There's your thumb up again, mate. Yeah.
Now, thumbs up again. There we go. And I'm now learning French. And how people who are bilingual, multilingual, can even speak English, let alone worry about getting a lot of words together. You're amazing. Don't let anything hold you back. But keeping it, as you were saying that, I was thinking that the more simple a language is when I'm getting, especially when I'm learning something. I'm a big believer in when you teach someone something for the first time, you've got to be very, very cautious because that's the only way they know how to do that. So you've got to make sure you get your point, you teach them very correctly and get your point across very clearly and well, so there's no misunderstanding.
With good structure.
With good structure, well laid out. When I'm listening to a presentation or a talk, or I'm getting taught something for the first time and it's simple words, it lets my mind kind of grasp the concepts, wander a little bit, and make sure I can, oh, hang on, maybe there's a problem here. Whereas what you said, if they're using bigger words, terminology, niche kind of stuff, I'm thinking, what's that? I'm spending all that extra brain power trying to figure out exactly what it is you're saying and coming from.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up. It's really hard to keep up. Tradies, me, I've had to expand my vocabulary. That's why I went to Toastmasters. I got by for 20 years on about 140, 150 words. That's all I needed. Didn't have to go anymore. But now there's 5 or 10 I can't use ever again. There's a lot that are getting banned daily. So I've really got to get that vocabulary going, which is hard. You know, it's hard to slow my brain down, get the words out, you know, all that kind of thing. I think the only thing we haven't touched on in credibility, and we could go on for ages, we really could, is leadership. I reckon we've got communications done, persuasion and influence done. A little bit about leadership, Paulie, being a credible leader. I know we did a bit on leadership in an earlier episode, but and we're getting a lot of people who want to be leaders talk about it all the time. So bring a little bit of credibility into your leadership. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think that people will, from a leadership position, and particularly a business leadership position, you know, they say when it comes to credibility that people don't care how much you know until they know that you care about them. Okay. And I think particularly with people leadership, and, you know, working with C-suites and replacement C-suites and new people moving in, how do you establish credibility in a short amount of time? I think people have different ways of doing it. But I think that, and this is going to sound a little bit sort of out there, but I think that you will have credibility depending on how you interact with other people. You know, I think that if somebody feels that you are credible, they're going to follow you. And I think that strong leadership, you have to have a degree of credibility, but what makes you credible? Listen, I think that, again, I think it depends who you're leading, because, you know, if you are leading massively high performers, high performing teams, salespeople particularly, and other areas as well, you're going to have a lot of different personalities there. And one of the marks that us salespeople might well have is that we might be a little bit disagreeable. Now, I hear a lot of people saying they don't want to work with people who are disagreeable. But the fact of the matter is if you have everybody who's just highly agreeable in your team, firstly, you find out nothing ever really gets done to the highest level. If everybody's just yes, but there's no constructive conflict of ideas. And I think that's genuinely where strong characters can thrive, strong, respectful characters can thrive. Because I think that especially when you're looking at leadership, say a CEO who is managing CFOs, CSOs, so chief financial officers, chief sales officers, chief technical officers, all of the senior level decision makers, you better believe that if they've got a track record on some way, shape, or form, there has been an ability that they have to be quite disagreeable, which is ultimately what you want. Because if you're steering a business and all of your heads of companies are all very agreeable to you, unless you've got all the answers and you just need everybody to sign off on, you know, then that'll be okay. But the vast majority of time, that's why you have a senior suite of people who have got very strong characters. I think strong characters can play out in different ways. It doesn't need to be the table smashing my way or the highway scenario. But I think that the soft skills, if I'm trading a CEO, and I'm thinking about one in particular at the moment, If I'm training a CEO who's dealing with very, very, very strong very strong opinions around them, then effectively that CEO needs to be able to have very strong interpersonal skills, because effectively it's how do you interact with each person to earn some degree of credibility. Now, there's always going to be positional authority and credibility there. So you're my CEO, I'm your CFO or CTO or what have you. There is already positional authority that you have that gives you some degree of credibility in my mind. But if we have conflict on the regular, and I'm not talking about constructive conflict, I'm talking about personality clashes, which gives me source for we're going to have conflict now, we're going to have problems, you and I, a personality clash, then that can become very destructive. And I've seen some phenomenal CEOs working with very, very capable C-suite who are very high-level decision makers, quite opinionated, not in a bad way, but they know when they're talking about their thing, that's what they're talking about. And that's what I want. I want people around me who know a lot more than I do in other areas.
Yeah.
And the soft skill ability that these CEOs have had to be able to lead, manage, and install a degree of credibility is absolutely phenomenal. But here's what I would say if I was going to boil it down. I think that at that level, I think that the way that you leave people feeling after their interaction is going to dictate whether they're going to see you as credible or not. Now, credible, I might see you as credible, but I might not see you as a good leader. So you might have all of the certificates and stuff like that. So yes, maybe you are credible in your particular field. But if we're talking about leadership, do I feel that you're credible to lead me? I'm going to make that decision on a personal basis, which is an interesting concept. It really is. And I think people will make decisions based on their own experiences with the leadership as to whether that person's credible or not. I'll tell you this as well. I think that if they see leadership making the difficult decisions rather than the easy decisions, that's going to put them out. So these decisions go against their best interests, but it's the best thing for the company, best thing for the team, whatever it is. If you start seeing that, if the team starts seeing leadership taking the brunt of difficult decisions, that's where I think a massive degree of credibility comes in. I really believe that. I think if I see you being brave and taking a difficult decision, I think that's where I have big respect for you and big credibility, because it is so easy to go with the easy decision, which is going to keep me out of trouble now, but later down the line, the company, the team, you're going to pay the price for it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, I tell you, but in between, behind closed doors, yes, the rest of the team can't see it, but that story comes out somewhere along the line.
Yeah. I like that level of disagreeability you must have.
Yeah.
And as a leader, you want people around you who are obviously experts in their field.
Yeah.
You got to be quite willing to defer to that level of expertise as well when the need arises.
Yeah.
But also you want that disagreeability. You want those disagreeable people because the constructive side of that, if you've got people who agree with you all the time, you're never going to see the other side. Yep. You're going to end up with a decision that's kind of half-baked. Whereas if you've got someone who pushes back, no, I want this, I want that. I find you end up with a decision or an outcome that was better than both you had in the first place.
Yeah.
Because it gives you, and if you've got 3 or 4 of those around you, you've got an even more rounded view of what's going on.
Absolutely.
And it gives you a more rounded view of the issue.
Yeah.
And it steers you towards a better outcome. So that's as a leader, and then like you said, making the tough decisions. But you get credibility from your people by showing that you actually care about them. You're listening to them.
Yeah.
They feel heard. They get understood. Comes back to those interpersonal relationships, communication. We'll talk about that. So
absolutely, and I think, yeah, I have big respect for people who make difficult decisions. That's going to put them on the back foot.
Absolutely,
because there are so many. And I'll tell you this, man, and you know this, Cuz, as well, and a lot of my clients know this. but I will only endeavor to have people with good character around me, people who are dependable and trustworthy. And I think that when I see people who are making the right decision, the difficult decision that's going to give them a rough time, is going to be more weight on their shoulders. That's somebody I see of character. When I see people who make the easy decision, it'll be, let me take that easier path now. No one will know. People will know. And that to me is not part of being a leader. It really is not. It's like, if you take the easy path out, someone else is going to have to pay the price for it. That's one of the things as a leader. You're the last one to leave the ship. But it's that strength of character. And I could go on forever about that.
I'm with you. After what I've been going through the last couple of years, if you turn down the hard work, if you turn down the hard road, and you decide to take the easy path, it just gets harder.
Yeah.
That hard bit will come up sooner or later. So now my brain just goes, that's the hard bit, I'm doing that first.
And I think I really like that when you choose the more difficult approach, because I'll tell you this as well, cuz I think that our relationship with ourselves goes down if we take the easy option. I'm starting to think that now. And it's if I know that faced with two options here, and I know I should take the more difficult one, but I take the easier one, I believe that my relationship with myself will go down.
Yes.
Because it's like you don't do what you know you need to do, because it's going to be too much of an effort, or it's going to be too difficult. And I think, bro, at the end of the day, man, I think that you really have to be able to rely on yourself. Yes, having friends around you, having family around you is beautiful. And if you have that, absolute every blessing to you, for real. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a time where, you have to rely on yourself. And that's when you go back to all your past reference points where you took on the bigger challenge and you didn't take the easy route out. And it's so beautiful, man. It really is, because when you're sitting at the end of your bed and it's like no one's coming to help because they've got their other priorities, and rightly so. When you know you're dependable because you proved it so many other times you went to jiu-jitsu when you really didn't feel like going to jiu-jitsu, you took the hard route. And that gives you a very good sense of self as well. And I think that in that state, I think that you really start to trust yourself. And I think you really start to like yourself as well. And if you can't be your own best mate, it's going to be a rough go,
Yeah. And I have to give a shout out here, because I was too far that way for a long time. I wouldn't ask for help from anyone.
Yeah.
I saw it as I didn't want to burden everyone else. So I would do stuff by myself. I built this house pretty much by myself. There was times when I just couldn't do things, and I had to get my darling wife up here or my son to help me lift stuff because I physically couldn't do it. But everything else, I just don't like asking for help. I never had. My good friend, our good friend, new purple belt, Taylor Douglas.
Yes.
At Rise. There's your shout out. That's the one and only, mate. He told me off a little bit when we talked about this, me and him, we talked about it on the mats, and he said to me, look me in the eye, and he said, well, you've told me that you really like helping people. And I said, I do. It's one of my great passions. I love it. And he goes, I love the feeling of helping and the feeling you get afterwards. I said, absolutely. You help someone out, you feel so good about yourself. He goes, so why are you denying other people that feeling by not letting them help you?
Wow.
And that just cut really deep. I'm like, oh, wow. So there are, that just cut me to pieces. And I'm like, oh, you're right. And he goes, yeah, why are you denying other people that feeling of helping you out?
Yeah.
And guess what? I still don't ask for help. But I have learned that there's times where I've just got to go, whether or not I need the help, if I get this person to help me, I'm doing a good thing for them. Absolutely. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there as well. So, look, thanks, Taylor. I owe you that one.
Taylor's a unique situation there, because I know he loves his stoic philosophy, as I think you and I both do as well. Plus, He's always on the mats, and there is nothing but truth on the mats. There's no place to hide.
Oh, I tell you.
He's got that beautiful stoic philosophy and that way of thinking, and then we get to apply it on the mats.
Yes.
And no place to hide. Everything becomes true on there. You know, if your technique doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does, it does. Only the truth reigns supreme, you know?
Exactly. And inside 2 months ago, I lasted maybe 15 minutes against him before he finally got me on a rear naked choke, choked me out.
Yep.
And it was just before his purple belt. So that, I feel great now. I just pumped myself right up. Taylor got his purple belt, and I'm just like, yes! I feel so good about that. So,
mate, it's all about the stories that we tell ourselves, yeah?
It is. It's all about the way you got to look at things, man. There's always two sides to that coin. Well, credibility. There's a lot on the jiu-jitsu mat. You go on the jiu-jitsu mat. If I find out that you are a jiu-jitsu person, you get way more credibility from me, because getting on those mats, that means something. I'll tell you that.
Doing difficult things, my man. Doing difficult things. Yeah.
Paulie, we've come to the end of another great podcast. Thank you so much for your insights. I think we'll do a bit more of this where we'll pick something and dig down into it.
Yeah.
Because, I think that people have got the understanding of where we're going with this. Now, if we start to really dig into some areas, which we will make up probably 3 to 4 minutes before the start of every episode, in our usual well-researched manner, we can really start to help some people out, I think, is the key to this one. So thank you all for listening.
Absolutely.
Catch up on the socials. Ask us any questions you want.
Yeah.
And we will see you next week. Paulie, have a good one. Take care.
Fantastic, guys. Thanks so much. All the best, folks. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy. Ciao.
Cheers.